everyone.
This, when you put K in?
Yeah. Good evening. Welcome to the Georgetown School Committee meeting of Thursday, November 10th. The meeting is now called to order. And this is a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, and we're going to be talking about the Pembroke School Building Project. We're going to start out with our work for a few minutes until the architects attend, and then we'll be starting on that. But Phil, if you want to...
Sure, that being just after 7 o'clock, I'll call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order.
Great, thank you. First item on the school committee agenda is to approve the regular session minute, or actually it's to approve the consent agenda, which includes regular session minutes from 10/27/11, acceptance of warrants 19V12, 18P12, and 20P12. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next up is our student representative, Matt Hartford.
Okay, so I'll continue with, we finished the Glee Given Out voting, ended this week, and we actually ended on the second page, so that meant we were in the top 25 schools.
All right, that's
out of a
really
couple hundred, so I think we have a pretty good shot at that. Boys won today, boys soccer won, and girls from my last update are winning 1-0 right now. And then cross country has states on Saturday, and we're looking forward to that. And Spirit Week starts next week, so the school's pretty pumped for the home Thanksgiving football game.
Yeah.
Right. Is this the second home football game that we've had this year?
Third,
No.
it'll be the third, right?
Okay.
Yeah, this will be the third.
All right, okay, good. We've had a few then.
Yeah.
Very good. All right, next is, we're going to skip the building committee until the architects are here. And once they're here, we'll go to that. Next up is, let's see, superintendent's information for the committee. Does anyone have any questions on that information? Financial report, we don't have one this week. Subcommittee reports, has anything come up since our last meeting?
We haven't met since our last meeting. We haven't met.
Okay. Governance, that's governance. Budget hasn't met. Negotiating, we haven't
I missed the meeting.
We haven't had a meeting.
There was a meeting, but there's nothing really new to report on
Okay.
it. There's going to be one more meeting where all the information will be pulled together, and then we'll see whether both sides are ready to come and talk before the committee to see about ratification.
Okay, great. Okay, going on to new business then. We are going to talk about the Pearly Conditions Assessment Priorities. This is a continuation of our discussion from a couple weeks ago about the Pearly roof. We received money from the CPC to fund part of the roof repairs, so now we just have to determine how we're going to use that money based on the report that we got from Mr. Hart. So,
Yeah, and I gave you just the first purposes of discussion.
So Carol had outlined, really kind of went through Mr. Hart's, it's Mr. Hart, right?
Mr. Hart.
Mr. Hart's recommendations and prioritized them. And we've been given $200,000 and we've been advised to apply for another $150,000 to finish this project, which would bring us to the estimated cost of $348,000. What this doesn't include that Mr. Hart had on his list was replacing the Pearly windows,
Right.
which we could do at a later time.
In the initial visit that was done by the historical society and the architect that went through initially with me, the historical architect, he said that the windows weren't on the radar screen. The things that were are the things actually that was nice that Mr. Hart found in his report,
Okay.
and is recommending that these would be the highest priorities to do. There's some time sensitivity to those, where the windows were something that could be done at a later date.
Are there any further questions or discussion about what Mr. Hart had presented? Last time he pretty much went into great detail about the
Yeah, it
condition.
was.
I thought he did a great job. It was pretty interesting to see. All right. Given that, the chair will entertain a motion to prioritize the items listed in the superintendent's recommendation based on the report completed by David Hart as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
And you might just wanna, for the public's benefit, just kind of give them a sense of what that money would be
Oh.
used for.
One of
I didn't see the
the,
report.
the whole crux of this repair is to repair the slate roof at Pearlie. It's, what did we figure, 80 or 90 years old? And Mr. Hart gave us a great description and photos of the roof itself and what needs to be repaired. The good news is we do not have to replace the entire slate roof. But we have an apportionment of about $16,000 to replace damaged slates. We're going to replace all the copper flushing and the gutters, which is all around the top of the roof, for about $123,000. Repair existing downspouts for $11,000. There is a rubber roof on the top of the building, which we'll be replacing because I believe that was beyond repair at this point, for about $38,000. Along with the replacement of that roof, we're going to have new rubber roof flashing, or upper roof flashings, for $38,000. Replacing downspouts, more, of $13,000. The existing cornice, which is around the top of the building, which if any of you look at it, it's really pretty spectacular to look at. That's going to be replaced, and it's going to maintain its current integrity or architectural features, so it'll look just as neat as it does now. And one special thing is we're going to put handrails in the front, something I think we all agree
Oh my God,
is
about time.
desperately needed there.
It's about time.
And when they do that, they're also going to pull out the steps, repair the footings, reinstall the steps, and repoint them. So the front is really going to look pretty neat. But it'll maintain the historic facade that we have going on right now. And I think that, and repair
Yeah, snow
snow
guard,
guards. And that all comes to about $348,000. But the idea is that we're going to maintain the building the way that it's currently existing. So it'll be pretty neat when it's done. All right. The next item is to accept a technology donation that was generously made by some parents at Pearlie.
Yes, they have generously paid for a smart board that's going to go in Donna Donahoe's classroom at Pearlie. So Mrs. Marv did put a little memo in your email and an email in your packet for your review on that. But they do request that this donation be done anonymously. So we will, if you accept it, we will thank them profusely. And I know Mrs. Donahoe would love to have this, and obviously it's increasing our technology in the school. So this is a very generous donation and greatly appreciated.
How many smart boards do we have at Pearlie right now?
Well, Pearlie, three.
This will make 4.
No, I'm sorry, this will make 3.
This will make 3. Okay.
She's assuming you're going to.
All right. How many classrooms do we have?
We have one in a kindergarten,
Okay.
one in a first grade, and then this would be another in the kindergarten.
Great.
And just to let you know, we have met, several staff have met to talk about grants through GDF. And I know Barry Belanger is writing one for a smart board for the school, to put into the library. So we are hoping a little at a time to add.
So, Margaret, would you say 13 classrooms? I'm thinking, because you have 5 Ks, 5 1s, and 3 pre-Ks?
Yes.
Okay. Great. The chair will entertain a motion to accept the anonymous smart board donation to the Pearlie Preschool as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Motion carries. Thank you to all of the anonymous, very generous citizens of this town.
Yes,
Without your
unbelievable.
generosity in, both time and effort, we couldn't be where we are today, and we really appreciate that.
Yes.
Okay, moving right along to the architect.
The architect is stuck behind an accident, so he thinks it's about another 10 or 15 minutes
Okay.
before he gets here.
Okay.
Do you guys want to start? Is there anything that you can do to start, or would you rather just wait for him?
He has the boards.
He has everything.
Yeah, he's got everything,
Okay.
so it probably makes sense to wait for him to get here.
All right.
Do you have
Do you
any
guys have any-
items of business?
Thing that you need to.
We are here with a mission tonight.
All right.
Stay on that mission to understand the options.
We'll do shadow puppets on the wall. Is anyone good at
Wait,
that?
talk about what the building committee accomplished the other night in terms of.
Why don't you come up,
Yeah,
Ellie?
if you want to.
Ellie has been sick for months. So,
Um,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
it's okay.
Oh, okay. And, well, before they start, can we just have add one item?
Absolutely.
One of Margaret's daughters has applied for a position as an aide. And one of the things that's required in the ethics law is that we need to do a full disclosure that that Margaret's daughter, it's possible that Margaret's daughter would be working in Margaret's school. So at this time, I think, Margaret, did you write something up, or what were you?
Well, I just wanted to let you know, not to apply for an aide, but for substituting for
Okay.
assistance. So, and they have already, one of my daughters last spring has substituted in the pre-K as an assistant, and then my other daughter has substituted as an assistant and at the extended day. So I want to make full disclosure about that, so it's not a full-time assistant job, but substitute assistance.
And the school committee has to agree to that. That's to be a school committee.
Okay.
So just make a motion that you will support the hiring of Margaret's daughters.
Or the use of,
As for-
the interim,
Well, they're not,
They're not-
as a
They're substitutes.
Substitute.
An assistant calls
Isn't it
out
just a
sick.
disclosure for the record?
I,
It's under Mass General Law, Chapter 2268A.
we
that,
researched it.
And that I'm making full disclosure
Yeah.
that I've hired a relative to be a substitute assistant. So I want to just.
I'll check and see. It's fine, as long as you're agree with it. I have to check whether the law requires a, I thought you had to vote to hire her, because
But
it's because she is, an employee.
does she count as an employee if it's a substitute?
Well, she's an employee. We pay her as an employee. She's not a, I mean, just, that's right, then you don't have
So
to worry
why
about
don't- Yeah, why don't we just vote and then,
it. And if you didn't need to, well, then you've done it
So-
anyway. You've more than done your due
Were there others-
diligence.
Can I ask a question?
yeah, absolutely.
Were there other people that applied for the position?
No, in fact, I will put it out there, if anyone would like to be a substitute assistant, we are always looking for a substitute.
Yeah, we posted and advertised for subs. We constantly have an
She was the
ad
only one
going
that
for
applied.
subs. Well, no, there are other people who are on the list as well. It's just, but because Margaret is an administrator in the district, the law requires that she disclose that someone.
Right, but I'm just saying from the position of the appearance of a conflict of interest, I just wanted to know
That's
if there
right.
were other people that.
No, they have not, she's not gotten a job with.
Right. Everyone that's applied, that's been suitable for the job, has gotten the job.
All right, and I
That's a great
assume,
question.
like, if there's a list of potential substitutes for assistants, you just kind of go through a list where
Right.
if you called one person, you call the
Well,
next one.
Katie Legear calls the subs.
Oh, and you don't even have anything to do with
Right,
it.
Katie Legear calls the subs.
Hands off.
Okay. All right.
Okay?
Okay, so the chair will entertain a motion to approve the hiring of Margaret Mayer's daughters as substitute assistants in the Pearly School for either the extended day program or any other program within the school.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
All right.
Appreciate you adding that. Oh, we have new people.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
But we're still waiting.
We are, but we'll start, and
Okay.
when he comes in, we'll probably just let him jump into the presentation and
All right, perfect.
then reconvene. So on Tuesday evening, the building committee met and reviewed to vote on the preferred option for the Pembroke School project. Because of the number of options we had, we actually took two separate votes. We voted on grade configuration and construction option to get to our preferred option. After evaluating K through 6, 1 through 6, and 2 through 5, the committee voted a K through 6 grade configuration for the preferred option. And after evaluating a renovation and addition and new building, the preferred option voted on was a new building. The committee voted 8-2 in favor of K-6 because we all agreed that it would provide the most educationally sound program for Georgetown. The committee voted 9-1 in favor of new construction, and some of the main drivers for the new building vote were that once the cost of a renovation addition approaches about 75% of the cost of a new building, it is a guideline that tends to not be a preferred investment option. Another one was that in a renovation addition, the classroom sizes would remain the same size, which are below MSBA standards. The gym dimensions would also be smaller than the MSBA standards because our gym would remain essentially the same. I mean, besides like a new floor and a little fixing up. The kindergarten classrooms would be on multiple levels in a renovation addition. Parking would not be ideal. There were definitely more parking options and spaces available with new construction. And a renovation addition would limit our flexibility to improve the situation on Elm Street as far as traffic goes. With new construction, there are more possibilities for traffic flow, and there are also ways to improve safety. That's a brief overview of some of the things that we looked at and led us to our decision. One remaining question is the location. We have 2 locations that we're looking at for new construction. One is on the current playing fields at Pembroke, and one is up behind the parking lot where like the teachers park up in the woods behind Pembroke. On Tuesday, we didn't have all the information for the site, so we did not vote on the location. We do expect that the building committee will be taking a vote on the location prior to your meeting next Thursday. So we will have that information to pass off to the school committee and the Board of Selectmen before you have to vote on the preferred option. And it's also been confirmed with the MSBA that at this time, we do not have to pick the design for the new building. So that in a nutshell is what has led us to picking K-6 and a new building as our preferred option, knowing that we still have to choose the location.
The design being, they've come up with a few alternatives, options for us to look at. And that doesn't really factor into the decision between new versus reno.
That,
Okay.
That'll come in when we do.
That was confusing.
Right.
No, I didn't- okay.
Okay, that'll come in when we do the schematic design. In the next step of votes after the preferred alternative, and once it's approved by the MSBA, then we will be coming to the school committee, the Board of Selectmen, and the building committee will also be voting on schematic design, and that will, in fact, be the design.
Okay.
So the,
And that also will take place after you've selected the site, so there won't be any
Right.
duplication of effort or work. It'll
Correct,
be
correct. This preferred option that we're going for needs to include the site
the site.
location.
Okay.
when he gets here, he has some boards that will show some various design
Designs
options
for
on the fields. And I don't know if they only have 1, perhaps 2 that they've worked out for the woods.
Right.
Okay. And we have enough, I assume we have plenty of land. They've already
Yes.
figured, they've been working on it for a long time, and
Yep.
so I figure they know better than I do.
Yep.
And would that, if you did the woods, would that help the access and egress? Or does that not really factor into either
It
site?
helps in some ways because if you go into the woods, you would then travel past where the school is located now, further back. So it would certainly draw traffic up off of Elm Street.
Okay.
The possibility still exists for the other entrance and exit onto Elm Street. We know it's size-wise may not be wide enough for two-way traffic. It could be that an option would be to just use it for busing only, and that would keep the buses out of the flow of traffic with the cars, which I think would also help with a lot of the confusion that sometimes happens when everyone's there at the same time. That has to be looked at a little more. We know the Elm Street residents are very concerned about exploring that as an entrance exit because Elm Street floods in that area. It's, from what we've talked about, the architects actually think that might help because if they're designing a road, then they will design it to collect the water that comes down.
The other option, just for that road, would also be for emergency vehicles, which we know is sometimes
Right, so
little
there'd
hard
be
for-
another Right.
Yeah.
For safety reasons, that's
Right.
such a wonderful option for us to have.
Right.
Another way to get into that school.
Because how many times do you go to other schools that you can only go one way in and one way out?
Exactly,
It's not,
yep.
it's not unique.
It's not uncommon, right?
No.
Right, and we know the traffic jam that happens in the morning and at pickup at Pembroke.
Oh, I can say I have not endured that this year.
So, Pat, is there anything you'd like to?
Well, if anybody, while we're waiting, if anybody had any questions on the matrix that we did,
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be, if there's
Okay.
any questions on how
That's
it's
the cost.
composed, or any questions you have, I mean, we'd be happy to kind of just walk you through how it's prepared. And again, I just want to emphasize, the matrix that's prepared is really to show the comparability between the various options, and also to show obviously, how the reimbursement arrangement works, so that a preferred alternative can be made. As we pointed out at the meeting the other night, when we submit to MSBA for the March board meeting, where they actually fix the scope and the budget of the project, this project will be probably 35% designed. Right now, we're probably 5 to 10% designed. So obviously, these numbers are going to, obviously, will be somewhat more fixed when we go in for the final numbers. So just to give you an idea. So the idea is to look at these as a comparable analysis, and to show how things end up working out and what they reimburse and what they don't.
So Pat, are you looking at the matrix or are you looking at the budget?
I'm looking at the dollars.
He's looking at the
I'm
pricing.
So he's
DRA
looking
will
at
do-
the
DRA
dollars.
will do the
He's
matrix
looking
and
at this
ours.
one. This is the one where each of the options
the
was
dollar
rated
Right.
by a certain set of criteria?
Right.
This is the one that breaks the money
The
down.
preferred alternative pricing.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I accept.
And the way we accumulated it, we have this 18 options. The 6 options on the front page are those that obviously the committee focused on. They're the K through 6 and the 1 through 6 options. So we basically put those on the front sheet and can kind of walk you through those.
Okay.
But if you look at the composition, up on top, when the architect gets here, he'll have boards, and obviously the option, the alphabet soup and the numerical values up on top, D1, D2, those obviously he'll walk you through those and tie those into the matrix that you have. But basically, you see the grade levels, and then the number of students, those have been agreed to with MSBA for the various options. There are no 2 through 5 options on here, though there are numerous 2 through 5 options behind here. We're required to do those for MSBA, even though they're not, at this point, desirable, but they're in here, so for comparable purposes. And then there's a brief explanation as to what the option is. And then there's construction time, I mean, that's gonna vary depending on obviously what happens. There's a little bit of an idea as to what would happen from today right through completion. And then it shows you the square footage. And each one of these now shows you the square footage. The first 2 options, the D options, are a composition of renovations and new construction. So you can see that in option D 2.1, there's 63,000 square feet of renovation and 20,000 square feet of new, for a grand total of 84,000. So as you work your way across, you can see that once you get to the new options, obviously there's no renovation because that becomes a brand-new building. When you work yourself down to the building costs, under renovation, addition, and site costs, MSBA requires that the architect hires an independent estimator, and they require that we also do a redundant estimate. So the estimates that were done were reviewed, and needless to say, because the design is only 5 to 10% complete, there was a tremendous amount of communication between the architects, the estimators, ourselves, to make sure everybody was on the same page. Then there's a reconciliation, and the numbers that are here represent the architect's independent estimator. Ours are very close because we've gone through a whole reconciliation on what's been done. And they're broken out in various pieces because there's different reimbursement ramifications to the numbers. We actually, right below there, we actually went back in and we actually made some adjustments to both of the estimates based on some of the design that wasn't yet complete. As an example, in the renovation projects, there was no major upgrading of the septic system, and there was no drainage yet because it wasn't yet designed. So we've carried allowances in here to cover some of those things that weren't yet there. We're trying to get the best representative picture based on the design that's been done. Once you run across, you'll see once you get into the F2s and F3s, the F2, the F4.2 and F4.3, you'll see there's an extraordinary site allowance. That's for the building, the new building being built in the woods. because of the topographical differences in some of the ledge. Those items have been carried based on the discussions we've had with the geotechnical people and the architects. When you get down below, you'll see the total site and building figure. There's a figure there, and then there's a contingency that we carry. MSBA allows us to carry a contingency, and this contingency is the contingency that would be carried once we enter construction, because on construction projects, everybody is aware that the things will come up that have to be taken care of. MSBA allows us to carry 5% contingency, but you'll notice it says 10% renovation. Generally speaking, on a renovation job, because there are more unknowns, we carry more contingency on the renovation side, and then on the new building, we carry the 5% that they allow. Even though they only allow 5%, whether it's a renovation or new, they allow you to carry the 10. It simply affects the fact that they will not be reimbursing against the other 10% should you need it. As you work your way down, fees, administration costs, those are all of the architectural fees, which is the lion's share of that project, that particular cost. The project managers fees, all of the testing that will be done by the owner during construction. So there is an approximate percentage that is carried there. It runs 21%. FF&E is furniture, fixtures, and equipment. That is a direct number that springs off of this number of students. MSBA allows $1,200 per student for FF&E. If you multiply the 1,200 times 665, you should come up with the 798. They allow the same allowance, the $1,200 per student, for technology. And again, those are both purchased separately, and usually the procurement occurs when you're 25% of the way through construction. That's when those documents are prepared and they're bid separately by the architect. Then there's an owner's contingency, and MSBA allows you to carry a 1% contingency for anything that comes up during construction that might involve some of these other items, the below the cost, the below the line items, the soft costs. Temporary classrooms, under the renovation procedures, we figure that, I think there are 5 classrooms right now. There's actually a bathroom facility. So we've carried 6 units, and they average about $100,000 for a 2-year lease. So we've got $600,000 plugged in for the temporary classrooms. Of course, with the new building, you don't need any. That takes us down to a total project cost. So if you look at the total project cost and run that across the bottom, that's how the projects look from a standpoint of the total dollars to be expended. Now, when you look at what does it mean to Georgetown and how does the reimbursement work? If you go below the line now, costs that are ineligible for reimbursement. MSBA does not reimburse for modular classrooms. MSBA does not reimburse for any work that occurs outside the property line. So we've anticipated we might need some lights out on Elm Street for access. There might be some sidewalk improvements or road improvements. So we've simply carried a dollar value, but again, identified that there will be no reimbursements for that. Construction contingency over 5%. Well, as we noted up above, for the renovations, we're carrying 10%. We think it's the prudent thing to do. And one thing that MSBA says, carry whatever you think you're going to need for these projects. Don't base it on what we're going to be reimbursing. We simply comment on reimbursability. We don't comment on what you should be carrying for various categories. So that's a classic example of we would be recommending that we carry for the renovation portion 10% versus 5%. But again, should you have to dip into that fund, they would not be providing any reimbursement. That takes you down, if you subtract those 2 items, that takes you down to the amount eligible for reimbursement. And then there's the reimbursement at 49 some odd percent, 49.1 or 2%, and that's your 15 million. On the renovation side, MSBA does provide for the renovation percentage of the project an extra 5%. So on the renovation solutions, you'd be getting the reimbursement based on your 49%, and then they would actually give you another 5% against the portion that's being renovated. So when you take those and subtract those 2 numbers from the total project cost down there, you'll come up with a cost to Georgetown that gives you an idea, a comparison between the various items. So the first 2 items are additions and renovation, first 2 categories. The middle 2 are the 2 new buildings, both 1 through 6, K through 6, for the new building in the field. And then the right-hand two are the new buildings going into the wooded portion of the property.
This is a question about the reimbursement for renovation. If we renovate and the classrooms are not up to the standard that MSBA requires, do they still reimburse you?
MSBA gives you a certain amount of flexibility when you're doing a renovation job. They know that when you're doing a renovation, certain things are not going to be up to standard, so that unless they miss by a lot, they will provide the renovation, but they leave it to the educators to decide whether that's going to be an item that is sufficiently undesirable to say that a renovation isn't going to be appropriate. Because the gymnasium that we have, when you look at the raw square footage, it meets the requirement. But when you start to subtract the perimeter area and the pilasters, those laminated beam pilasters project in, they provide, an intrusion. So again, it's less than desirable, but what MSBA says is, if you're willing to live with it, I guess we're not going to stand in your way. But they are negatives that you would look at as you looked at the renovation project. There are certain things that obviously are going to be more restrictive because of the very nature of the building configuration. Things have changed a lot in 42 years.
Shocking.
Question?
Yep, go ahead.
I think this is the first I've heard of the option of putting the school in the woods. Is that true, Ellie? Because
It is.
going way back, and I think,
Which is,
just when I look at that, and I didn't know that was even an option. I know, because I think it's like ledge, right? It's like a hill, isn't
they
it? So
thought it was ledge, which is why when you looked under the rock allowance, they put 1,000,002. They actually got out there today and started looking at it, and they actually didn't, where they look, find any ledge, which is very promising in terms of bringing that figure down.
Yeah, I think that was my biggest.
But the
thing that just kind of
topography
popped out
is
on me. It's like
strange.
it's an extra $1 million
Yes.
that would cost the town a lot more money to.
Right.
So I don't know if there was a.
That's why we didn't
benefit
vote.
to put it. Okay.
Right.
The benefits are,
I heard what you said
right,
about the.
what we talked about before, but right now that figure is high because it really is a little bit of an unknown. So we're working to get as much information this week as we can to clarify that more. I think we didn't, as a committee, stress enough that we did want that to be an option because we were all under the impression that it was all ledge and just assumed that it would be cost prohibitive. And several people in town have come forward and said, that's not the case. You really should get out there and look. So that's what has happened. They went out there and looked, and yeah, there are challenges. It would definitely be a multi-leveled building, but it's certainly something that's doable. So that's why we need to look at it further. And
So is there any negative to where? Because I've always heard that the footprint would be like where the fields are. That's always been discussed over the last 8
Yeah.
years or whatever.
right.
Right.
Was there any negative that came up about putting it there and looking at the option of putting it in the woods, or was it simply the traffic?
It's two things. One is the traffic. Two is if you put it on the fields, the school will be without any fields for a couple of years. So it's just a way of saying, not only will we be able to keep the fields, but when the old building comes down, there would be more land available for even more fields. So as a town, is that an option that we want to take? Because we know fields are an issue. So that's why we wanted to pursue it and get the figures and really be able to honestly say to people, look, it might be a little more. Is it worth it to the town? But there's also the safety factor, having that other entrance and exit. That is a huge factor in making a decision.
And as far as the topography, they were trying to go back and pull some of the plans from the original, like late 60s when the original Pembroke was built. And the topography where Pembroke is may be similar to what they are finding behind it. So, they went in and they dug 2 5-foot holes and did not hit any ledge. And they're getting with geotech and they're going to get out and put some borings out there and do further testing. But they were pleasantly surprised, I guess, that there was no ledge. So, step one.
Thank you.
Step one.
Right.
Thank you. That's all I had.
So they're here and can,
While he's setting up, I guess, I watched the meeting the other night, and I commend you guys on the process that you guys have gone through so far. Being part of the committee earlier, I know how much work up front was done, when even before I even played on the committee, years and years has been done. So I commend you guys to getting to this incredible point where we are today, and the hard work ahead. I wanted just to ask, and I believe the K through 6 option, you guys have done some great due diligence, and according to the educational factor, it's a very important, which I know we might speak of additionally. Help me just, what do we know about Pearly School in terms of what that building can be used for, and what's factual and what's opinion right now?
Well, what I think we know is, based on the Pearly Trust, that it has to continue to have an educational purpose. Now, what we don't know, or at least I feel like I don't know, is, so what does that not make possible? So, we have been talking about, well, what would we use? I know the administrators, of collecting information from them, the school committee, I'm sure we'll have a conversation about, we'll invite the public, obviously, to discuss that as well. But our intention would be at least to maintain the preschool programs there and possibly to expand them. Because every year we have waiting lists of people, and we have people who have to leave town because there aren't enough open spaces in our preschool program. So to be able to expand that and possibly even to generate some revenue from that, by opening it up to people outside of Georgetown. We have some other, things that we could use. For example, at Pearly, our art and music programs are in the basement. We need to move those up into a more suitable location and space. We have some needs to expand some of our special education programs, which we could use space for. I would, I believe we'd move some of our central office folks that are now housed in the high school, because one of the other things with this is to alleviate some space issues at the high school. So for example, the special education department is over there. Some of our curriculum office functions are there. So we would bring those, over so that we would truly have a central office where people were located. Those would all, fall within an educational, setting. We have some needs for some additional spaces for some different additional programs that we just really don't have room for now. So I don't know, however, people have asked, can we relocate the town offices there? Could we use it for a senior center, which would be a great opportunity potentially, not only for the town, but for us to do intergenerational work with our preschool children, working with, our older citizens. That would be something I would hope, and I've heard that that's a town need. But I don't feel like I know, and Mike, is Mike here? Mike, do you know any more about that? I know we talked about.
Yes, I do.
Okay, what do you know?
Matter of fact, I have a copy of the Pearly deed.
There we go.
And it basically says, in the event that the town of Georgetown, having complied with the following conditions, shall at any time cease to use the land conveyed or any portion thereof for school purposes for a period of more than 3 years, then the grantor may re-enter and take it back. But the exceptions are, they accept that the town may include a town hall and offices for various town officials in the building, and may permit such other incidental and occasional use of the property as are authorized for school property by Chapter 71, Section 71 of the Mass General Law. And that Section 71 is quite broad, because it would also allow the use of the premises for school purposes, shall allow individuals and associations for such educational, recreational, social, civic,
There you go.
philanthropic, and like purposes as it deems for the
Yeah.
interest of the community.
There you go.
It's pretty broad.
So it's got some nice, so that would be a broader conversation than just the schools, in terms of, what could we do to be able to satisfy some other needs within the town, if we were to go with this option of K through 6.
Couldn't have been clearer.
Thank you, Mike, I appreciate you having that.
Can I just ask a procedure question? So, in terms of what we're supposed to accomplish as the
Oh,
3 boards?
Why don't I was going to do a little introduction before we started, but since we have started in
Sure.
pieces. Let me do my thing and then
Great.
ask away or fill. Is everyone here now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I was gonna do this at the beginning, but we kind of moved things around, so I'll just do it now. The purpose of the meeting tonight is to understand the preferred development option for the Pembroke School, which we've started to discuss. Just by way of background, the town created the building committee to move the Pembroke School project along. It's not a school committee, it's not a Board of Selectmen committee, it's a town committee for a town building. So everyone should understand that. And it's taken a tremendous amount of work by all parties to get to this point now. We're fortunate to have our co-chairs, Michelle and Ellie, who have coordinated this project and worked with members of the committee and spent hours and weeks and years of their life pulling this together, and for which we're eternally grateful. So we appreciate all of that. Both the Board of Selectmen and the school committee each have one representative to the committee. From a school committee perspective, we've been getting updates every meeting that we've had related to the most recent building committee meeting. Rob's kept us apprised of that. And hopefully the Board of Selectmen has been fortunate to have that same updating. And the building committee itself has had countless public meetings, many of which have been televised of late. So the process has been very transparent and the information has been very available to the public. So the goal tonight is to understand what options the building committee considered and why the preferred option was chosen. We have, as a school committee, we have another meeting scheduled for Thursday, November 17th to continue discussing the preferred option and to vote on the option based on the information that we're being given tonight. And I think, in speaking with Phil earlier, they have a meeting scheduled for November 21st where they will continue their discussions and actually take a vote as well.
Correct.
So the reason for kind of having, I don't want to call it a short amount of time, we have an hour planned for this, but we have a hard stop at 8:15. The idea was to get because we have an executive session that we have to attend to, but the idea is really to understand what got you to this point and what the preferred option is. We don't need to go into the history of the first brick laid at Pembroke and everything, because you guys have done such a great job in meeting and explaining all that.
I'd just like to add one thing. It's really important that the boards vote on the time frame that has been set up, because we need to submit to MSBA everything that's been voted on, and the boards need to sign off of them, and it needs to be in to MSBA by the first week in December. So that gives our project managers time to get everything together, get the paperwork to you, get it signed. So it's really important that we just keep moving forward. We can't keep saying, come back again. You know, when it's time to vote, we really do have to vote, and we think you'll have all of the information that you're going to need to do that.
And we scheduled a special meeting next week for the purpose of continuing the discussion. It gives our committee another week to ask you questions, to ask the architects questions, to fully digest all.
And to hear from the
all of
public. Hopefully, people will
Right.
call, send emails, or come to the meetings and
Right.
and
But we
express their
will vote
opinion.
next Thursday.
Yes.
So to clarify,
Oh,
then,
sorry, yep,
so that's,
Steve.
that was great. Thanks. So to clarify, though, we're not all picking options. The MSBA requires that all three boards support one option, correct?
Correct.
So we'll be taking a vote to, in essence, support the recommendation of the building committee, yes or no. And if for some reason the three boards don't all get a yes, you would have to come back with an alternative that all three boards could eventually support. But we're not picking our favorite from each
No.
board. We're supporting the recommendation or not supporting it. And if if all three boards don't support it, then
There's a problem.
Right. The task of
There's a timeline problem.
The task of the committee was to come up with a preferred option, and they held, I don't even want to guess how many public meetings to discuss I think you mentioned 18 options that were considered. So if we're at a point now where we're going to start going back to the 18 options, we've got a big problem.
Yep.
There's been plenty of time and plenty of opportunity through the public meetings to bring that to people's attention.
Okay. Would you like us to, Carl?
We'll let Carl start doing
You
this.
slide back.
Slide down. I don't know if you need to slide so you can see it, I'm not sure.
Got it memorized.
You got it memorized?
I wonder why.
Around the corner there so I can get a view of what's going on.
Put it into memory, I can't even look at it.
Is that what you picked up?
Just fell on.
Picked up.
All set? Good evening.
Yes.
Carl Franceschi with DRA, the architects working with the building committee on this project. I'll try to be brief and leave plenty of time for your questions. I think I understand what you're looking for tonight. I can tell you that the reason we have 18 options, or there were 18 options originally, is sort of a factor of math here, in that unlike a simple project, you might say, where there's one building and one grade configuration, here we have the possibility of 3 different grade configurations that were overlaid onto, let's say, 2 basic construction options. There's the idea of adding and renovating the existing Pembroke School, or replacing it with new construction. Those are really the 2 building configuration options that proved to be reasonable in the end. And then the 3 grade configurations got multiplied times those 2 options. And because within the new construction option, we'll show you, there are a few different variations. That's how it got multiplied up to 18. But in reality, and this is the way the building committee thought of it the other night too, and you've already both, I don't know if the selectmen, the school committee has already talked about grade configuration and expressed a preference, as did the building committee. And so it was expressed there that K through 6 was a preferred option. So in a sense, that narrows it down from 18, now down to 6. And of the 6 options, so to speak, there's the idea, as we said, of adding and renovating the existing school, and really to accommodate K through 6 enrollment. There was really, from a conceptual point of view, really one option looked at there as a way to do that. And for new construction to accommodate K through 6, there were 2 or 3 variations in one location in the current athletic fields at Pembroke, and a sort of a 3rd one in the woods, so to speak, to the south of the existing Pembroke school. So those were the options that were seriously considered, and ultimately what we ended up doing with those basic options here, we, along with the building committee, came up with some criteria as to how to evaluate these, so that it wasn't purely subjective as to how we'd get to a preferred option. We tried to be
Paul, did you have copies of this? Because I'm wondering if
I
members
do
of the
have
pub, well, members, maybe some of the members
have
of the
some
public would
additional
like to
copies.
have an opportunity to
Right.
look at one if you're gonna, because it's hard.
That handout matches this selection here. So I won't
Thank
go
you.
into all the criteria, all the numbers now, but I just want to mention that's the process that was used. And just quickly to share with you, to
Can
show
I just
you.
clarify? So,
Sure.
in a process like that, you're really looking for orders of magnitude of difference, right?
Yeah.
Versus
Yeah.
a 62 versus a
Yeah, we all
64
have 'em.
does not declare a winner. But a
Exactly.
50 compared to a 65 or something shows that there's a gap, right? So it's not a numeric horse race of 1 or 2, it's trying to show magnitudes of
Exactly.
fit.
And backing this up, there's some data, both cost data and some other subjective data that was factored into this to try to take out some of the subjectivity of it. But clearly, there are differences of opinion among the group, and we try to arrive at consensus. Just quickly to share with you, there was a renovation addition option on the table that included not only renovating the entire existing school, but adding on in the direction of the playground and also to the back of the school as well. To do that required, and you can imagine requires phasing. Construction would happen while the school is occupied and under operation. So these areas in red, the contractor would sort of have control initially of this portion of the site and construct those portions of the building during the school year, and more particularly, once those are even complete, the renovation of the existing has to be broken down into pieces to allow the contractor to work in discrete areas of the building. So clearly there are some issues there, and those showed up in the evaluation, that disruption and uncertainty of doing renovation in an existing building were some negative points there. To show you the couple of options for the new school, first of all, the existing school sits here. Elm Street is here. This is the current driveway coming in and around now to get you oriented. So this blue dash is the location of the existing school. One possible location for a new school is on the current athletic fields. So shown in white here is kind of a linear scheme with a new drop-off area for cars, a separate drop-off area for buses, kind of an expanded parking area. And once that's built, and again, that gets built while the existing school stays in operation, then after that comes online, the existing school is demolished and replaced with playing fields, athletic fields, and parking as needed there. So that's one configuration. A second, just to show you that there are different possibilities here, it is sort of a courtyard arrangement of a building. Again, slightly different position on the site. A third here, one that is more in the shape of a letter K with separate wings. The thought being that these wings, one could be lower grades, one could be upper grades, and the common cafeteria gym on one wing there. And again, these are conceptual options, but to show you that there are some options.
The question is, where would the library be? Would that be in the center there?
The library would be right in the center there, in the middle floor, so that the children could access it most easily. So that's another option with here. So you can see there are a few options on the athletic fields, and then in the option that develops the woods, let me turn it more this way, maybe that's more consistent. The existing school is here currently. The parking lot is right here now. That's to the right of the school. It's to the south. North is up. This proposal suggests bringing that existing road, basically continuing it through the parking lot into the woods. There are several issues to be dealt with here, one of which is there's a small wetland here that has to be respected, and there's significant up and down contours that also have to be dealt with. That's one reason for the curves here you see and the trees that are remaining in the contour line. But there is a spot in here, kind of a saddle of land, where a building could be located. It would straddle the contour such that this would be an upper level entrance, this would be a lower level entrance into a common lobby. This would be a 3-story building, but you would enter on the middle level from here. We could separate cars and buses. And again, the thought is to do that for both safety and also to extend the queuing distance for cars so the traffic doesn't back up onto Elm Street. And that arrangement would allow that. For those who are familiar with the site too, the property does include a little dogleg piece of property that goes out to Elm Street. As we surveyed that and looked at it, unfortunately, currently only 30 feet wide, stone wall to stone wall, and it's not flat there either. That's not wide enough to do a two-way road currently. The building committee and it was conservation agent did think that it's worth considering acquiring some property on either side of that to widen it. Although we do have to consider that the project at this point, to make the timeline and make the submittals that we're talking about, should really be able to stand on its own currently. And if we can get improved access there, or even improved access across land, again, that the town does not own currently, but from the south, if that could be acquired, that would be an improvement to the project. But the project in this location should stand on its own in order to move through the process on the current schedule. So this is a sort of fourth new building option, and it's referred to as the school in the woods as opposed to the school on the playing fields. That's how we basically distinguish those options. And from the MSBA's point of view, at this point in the process, they don't particularly care that we narrow down exactly which of these options, which building configuration is the preferred option, but they do want the town to consider the location. Is it here or is it in the playing fields? And they want to make sure that sufficient homework is done on either one of those parts of the site, that there's geotechnical investigation, that there's survey, that there's been study of those that go along with the cost information. So
Just-
after looking at those. yes,
Just one
Ann.
quick question. The access way to Elm Street, that's about 30 feet.
The right-of-way is
Yeah, I'm
30
sorry, the
feet,
right of way.
yes.
Is that large enough for a single lane road?
Yes.
That is, okay.
Yes.
That's fine. That's,
And what we would propose in this option is, again, depending on whether property is acquired or not, but if it's not acquired.
assuming not acquired,
It could
right?
be used, first of all, as a construction access. So that's one of the attractive things about this, is that you could totally segregate the construction activity from the ongoing school. In other words, if construction activity, if the road, the pathway in could be built first and used by the contractor to construct the project, then the construction traffic, as well as, to the greatest extent, the noise, is segregated from the school activities, and obviously the fields aren't impacted. So the kids still have access to the playground, the town still has use of the playing fields. After the project's complete, we would see this being used as emergency access. In other words, because it's not wide enough for two-way traffic, one initial thought of, say, having buses come in here and leave there, and totally separated from car traffic on the other side, doesn't really work. You have to make the connection anyway, so if you're going to be having traffic come in and out both ways, it's probably best just to leave this as emergency access, as a footpath, as a bike path. And again, it takes away one of the issues with the current school, that, with only one way in, if a tree should fall, we're all aware of that now, after the recent storms, or an accident, tie up, the access to the site on that driveway. This at least gives you a secondary way out. So in looking at these options, as I said, we did do an evaluation, and we initiated it. Let's see if those stay. We initiated the scoring and then talked about it as a committee. The first order of magnitude issue that showed up is that the options for addition renovation clearly scored lower than the options for new construction. And so the first vote that was taken by the building committee was that the preferred option is a new construction option versus an addition renovation option. And then the other was to reinforce the notion that K through 6 is the preferred building configuration again. So in essence, we're narrowed down to a K through 6 new building on the field or a K through 6 building in the woods. Right now, we haven't got a preferred option of those two options, frankly, because one, the cost information we have currently suggests that the new school in the woods, because of all the site work there, is more expensive than building in the athletic fields. There are other differences, though, as we mentioned. The construction activity is segregated. The end product, when you get done, the town would end up with more playing fields, and the playing fields would not be disrupted during the construction process for those couple of years, which could, reduce impact elsewhere in the town. So there are definitely some pluses. The question is still to be debated among the building committee is there value for that extra additional cost that the new school in the woods provides. We're in the process of refining those cost numbers and getting more information. We do believe that we know that there is some rock exposed ledge on the site, adjacent to the existing school. We tested a couple of these knobs more recently. Maybe Michelle was explaining that as we came in. Didn't encounter any rock. We went down about 5 or 6 feet. They're good material. That's good positive news. We still have to deal with the contours, though. There's some significant, there's over 30 feet of grade change between that point and that point, for instance. And that's a lot. It has to be modified with walls. You can't have very steep, safe roadways for buses and cars at that gradient. So, and to protect this wetland, too, and not impact it, we'll end up with a few walls and some grading around there as well, retaining walls when we talk about walls. So that does drive up the cost somewhat. And you can see we're building more roads here than the school and the other portion of the site too. And the building itself, if it does straddle the contours, is slightly more expensive than the equivalent building on the other fields. And we don't have quite as many options here for design as we did in the playing. We showed you a courtyard in a K shape and a linear shape. We don't have all those options here. They're going to be more limited somewhat. So those are some of the things that we and the building committee are still wrestling with to determine, which is the preferred location for the school. But we have narrowed it down to, as we say, new K through 6 building, and we're just trying to decide where on the site makes the most sense.
And Steve and Phil, just so you know that, and I guess Michelle and Ellie, you can clarify as well. We're planning, when we hold our vote next Thursday night, we know the grade configuration is proposed to be K to 6, and you're going to let us know your vote for the site. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so
Right.
both the Board of Selectmen and the school committee will be voting on K to 6 and the same site, whichever one you're going to provide us with,
Right.
based on your further work.
Right.
Okay.
A quick process question. Are you going to be available, a representative from the building committee and architect at the Board of Selectmen meeting
Yes.
on the 21st?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I just have one comment.
Sure.
Because you guys are going through your vote, coming up into ours, and the assumption right now is that egress, or that access right
Mhm.
away right now, is a possibility at best right now. And when the building committee is getting together, I guess, what has been done to study the impact on Elm Street, where we're gonna have 50% more vehicle traffic, to the mess that we have down there right now? I know there's been some study to that, but if we don't get that access,
Where are you getting 50% from?
well, there's,
The
how many?
enrollment's
there's two more-
increasing
There's
from
Because
two
you're
more.
putting the two
500 to
okay.
7.
All right, so you, okay,
It's at
that's,
least
all right,
50,
yeah, all right,
right?
that's fine.
I
I
didn't
was
even count
just,
kindergarten.
It
'cause
is
that's-
roughly 50%.
no, you're rough, okay, perfect. I
Increase
just
in
wanted to make
student
sure, all
enrollment.
right.
We hope that doesn't translate to a 50% increase in number of cars, but
This is Georgetown.
it is a straight line.
We're talking little kids.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so,
Thank you.
Drop off
I just
twice. so.
Yes, so one of the things that I think it might be helpful is, can you explain with that option right now that we're looking, where you're putting the buildings situated in the woods, without that access road, does that have an impact on alleviating some of the pressure at Elm Street
The
based on
positive thing about this is that it gives the cars longer distance to queue up.
Right.
And the biggest impact on Elm Street right now is in the afternoon when the parents arrive early, waiting to pick up their children, and they stack up and back up onto Elm Street and really impact the neighbors. There's the volume of traffic that happens, and that will happen regardless of the building location. In terms of car trips on Elm Street, that won't change. But in terms of impact on Elm Street, this does help even without that.
Right.
That access, because again, buses will still enter the same way, but they'll stack separately on the site and free up area for cars to stack. And we'll do that in each case, separate cars and buses better than it is today.
Just on that same thing was, and the other options on the field,
Yes.
where there were also longer queuing
Exactly.
options
We would
as
do
well.
the same. It's not quite as long as this in the other options, Carol.
Okay.
But we would still do that. You can see we're extending the drive, making it long. And also, if those familiar with the school right now, only 4 or 5 cars at a time can pull up to the front door now, and they have to wait and then sort of move along. It's like a ride at Disney or something, and then they go.
Fun never
It's
ends.
actually, it's actually a pretty ingenious system, but
We
it is fun
propose,
to watch.
that in any of these, you can get a much longer curb to pick up and drop off and a wider road that the traffic will flow better. And that will help as well in any option. It's not, inherent in either one.
Can I ask just a question then? Just because you guys don't have enough work to do already. But is there a way to approximate how many cars the current driveway holds now?
There is.
And how many cars, the new driveways, or I call them driveways, the new
Yep.
roads
Two
would
driveways,
hold?
yeah.
And account for just to know, because,
We can do that, yes.
just to know that the overflow of the new students doesn't account and fill it up, and it's the same problem.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Good point.
I just have one last question, and I'll let you guys, because I know we're going to cover all this stuff. But just on the options matrix right there,
Mhm.
does the MSBA have any there's any weighting difference for cost, construction, education, or project? I know we probably have our own, weighting that we take personally, and that's probably individualized as well. But does the MSBA have?
It's a good question, because they are a partner in this, and they do consider themselves that way, but they are okay with the town sort of taking the first step and making their judgments. Their guidance, so to speak, would be that you're making judgments based on sort of valid criteria, whatever they may be, that they're valid for this town and for a school project. So, if one of the criteria was solely, do we get, a gym that the high school kids can use out of the project? If that were important to the town, MSBA would push back and say, whoa, 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 whoa. This is the Pembroke Elementary School project. We're not here about a high school-sized gym. So they would sort of cross that off the list and say, you shouldn't be considering that. If the prime reason to bring up the kindergarten and first grade was to build a senior center at Pearlie, just to put that out there, they'd say, no, 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 no. We're in the business, MSBA speaking, of supporting elementary school project here. And that's not a strong enough reason to do that. It should be based on valid educational reasons.
Right.
So they do look at those numbers, those criteria rather. But other than that, they will let the town sort of determine what the weighting is, what's important to the local community. But as far as cost, they certainly look at cost. And if the preferred option is not the most economical option, they'll want to know why you favor, the one you do as a town. And again, if you can use the matrix, if you can use valid educational reasons, generally, they can be convinced that and support the project.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think that as a building committee, we would also like some input from you as to what you like. I mean, you're not being held to it, but what is your first instinct in terms of plans?
I'll be the first to speak on that, because no one else is willing to.
You're not committed, just your first instinct.
No. Well, look, there's two things here. One is educational impact that I think is critical, and I think from a program standpoint, make sure that our kids are educated the most effective and efficient way. I look at that as the highest priority. The second to that is cost, because for everything we want, there's a cost for that. And then the next thing that's most important is the impact on the local abutters in the community. We need to be very careful on making sure that they are a heavy part of this thought process as we pick this preferred option. I'm worried to death that we're going to just build a school that has more volume, and the volume isn't necessarily going to be any different, even though we put more roads and more queuing, that the volume, the issues still remain. It's just most of it's now on property, and the same amount that's on Elm Street. So we have an opportunity to really make an impact to fix the Elm Street issues right now, and I think that needs to be carefully considered.
From our perspective, it's simply amazing to see what you've done with the site and the options that you've come up with. It's amazing what we can actually put on there. I think from an education perspective, it'd be it would also be equally as great to get all the things that we want. I think but we have to temper that with the cost, because that is definitely going to be an issue. When I look at the renovation versus the new build, it makes sense to me to understand how you felt on the new build side of it. Because I think what's also missing here, that you all have more experience as the architects than I do, is once you get into that renovation, it would be great if we could hold you to this number, but you're going to uncover things in there that no one could have possibly predicted. And it would be even more wonderful to say, unequivocally that a 5 to 10% contingency is perfect. There's also an equally good likelihood that it's not. So then my biggest concern was that we're going to go from the difference between the new build and the renovation is going to creep right up to that new build if we embark on the renovation. It's something we don't know, and it's something that we have to consider. Unfortunately, the location of Pembroke constrains us with the traffic issue. I don't know what the answer to that is. I think, putting 300 more students in there is definitely going to increase traffic volume, no question. Is it going to be a 50% increase in traffic? From what I understand, when I was doing pickup at Pearlie and Pembroke, I was going from Pearlie and racing over to Pembroke. I would like to think that it's not going to be a 1-to-1 increase. I would
There are
hope
some
that.
siblings that will get driven in one car.
I have to
Right.
believe that I'm not the only parent that ran from Pearlie to Pembroke when I had a child in kindergarten and one in grade.
I have the record for time.
You do? Yeah, see, I think.
used to always be first in line.
Well, so everyone has their stories of, picking up multiple children at different schools. So I'm not saying that there will not be any increase, but I can't believe that it's going to be it's not going to be 1-to-1.
I'm also concerned about the impact of the students that are in the building while this is going on. I love the idea of the construction being behind them. They still maintain some place to have recess. The noise is reduced. The disruption to them is reduced. And the teachers. And to Dr. Taylor. I'm not sure that reason is enough, for me to decide that, the woods are the best. But I do feel like impacting the students with the building going on around them, having the entire playground, it looked like, that they use now, being used as the staging area or whatever, would be difficult to deal with for 3 years. That's almost the entire career of kids at that school right now. So.
I would second that too. We can say, well, future fourth graders or fifth graders won't deal with it, but every individual gets one fourth grade and one fifth grade. You know what I mean? So they,
It's their lifetime.
En masse, it works out, but that the individuals get their piece of it. And the part I'd like to put out there on the option is, one of the challenges we will have as boards and towns is getting our head around this magnitude of dollars. $20 million, unless you're Tom Brady, that has no meaning in your life, right? So I think Mike did some great work to try and break that down, what that means on a bond over 20, 25, and 30 years. Because over 30 years, this will sound terrible, it will probably be a headline for the wrong thing, but $1 million is not a lot of money over 30 years. And what I mean by that, proportionally, $1 million over 1 year versus spreading it over 30 years is a very different thing. It's like when we buy a house. I know a lot of people that saved that extra 10, 20, 30,000 on the house, and then 5 years later they were kicking themselves because if they had spent that extra, they wouldn't have to move to their next house. So when you have a long-term mortgage on a house or you have a long-term bond, it's a very different game. And I think we need to understand when there's, $1 million difference on a 30-year bond, that's 7 cents per 1,000 on our taxes. And again, every penny on our taxes we should scrutinize. We shouldn't do it casually. But we really need to get our heads around that says the right solution for this much more over 30 years with the bond is a very different number than what we typically talk about, which is an annual operating cost, when we have our $20 million to spend. So I know that was, and Mike, that thanks is very helpful, and I'm not sure if all the 3 boards have gotten it yet.
No, you didn't.
But I think it'd be a good thing for distribution because it really grounds you on what does it mean to add kindergarten and have $2 million more in there. It's $200,000 a year. It's 10 cents on our thing to understand. And I guess the one thing I would encourage, and it's funny, every time you become a board member, on any board, the first thing you talk about is the things that we didn't do right in the past. And I can't wait, when it's my time and they'll explain to me all the things I did wrong. But this is our chance to do it right now. This is a 50-year, 40, I've heard different numbers, 40, 50-year solution. We should do it right because there are other implications to the town, as Phil said, for abutters and beyond that for implications here. So we don't have an indoor swimming pool. We don't have all those things you probably hear about, those
Marble
fancy high schools,
countertops.
the big money. This is a fundamentally basic school design that is technology appropriate for our era with the opportunity to upgrade. So there's nothing fancy. but it's expensive, and we really need to understand what every $1 million means to us as taxpayers.
Well put.
Carl, the only thing I would add is it might be worth an exhibit all in and of itself on this parking issue. Cars on Elm Street today, the worst case scenario, it just, it's worthy of that.
Okay.
I have a question on the Elm Street impact. If there's planned improvements to Elm Street, are they widening? What are the planned improvements overall that we've talked about? I haven't picked them up in watching, the different meetings.
Are we having planned
Yeah,
improvements?
there's.
It's part of the program.
At our community
apparently.
meeting, we had one meeting that was specifically for Elm Street abutters, and there was some talk about consideration of issues like repaving, but widening. One of the things that came out in the discussion was that Elm Street, though not officially designated, it is considered like a scenic way historically, with stone walls and certain trees, and widening wasn't really going to fit with that, and that was one of the reasons too that even the second driveway on that piece of land was considered a negative to some Elm Street abutters because it would change the character of the street. They weren't thinking necessarily the traffic impacts, they were thinking of the visual sort of character of the street, and that was seen as a negative. But we're not aware of any specific planned improvements for Elm
It's
Street.
the oldest street in Georgetown.
Right.
There is a third option for access. We did talk about it. It's not a viable alternative at this stage in the development, but when we're talking about a 40 and 50-year-old lifetime of a school, this other access could be developed over the next 3 to 5 years. So it does have some challenges. It has deed restrictions, it's state-owned land, and it would take 2 to 3 years to even sort it out, but it's probably the best access of all the, I believe, and staff believes. The town planner first came up with it, Nick Cracknell, and he enrolled Steve Przemski, the conservation agent, and Peter Durkee also believes it's a very viable alternative.
What Mike's referring to is.
What is that?
This area in black is the school property. Here's the school right here. Pembroke is over here. Elm Street is here on this side. This is East Street down here, right where Elm Street intersects 97.
Yeah.
It's a funny sort of intersection right now. That would have to be improved. But the thought is there's a piece of property here that's owned by the state. It's not developed. There may be a path on there, but there are no houses. That if access could come from the south, then you're taking traffic, virtually entirely off Elm Street. There might still be a second way out, but if this intersection were to be improved, again, this is kind of planning that town planners do. They think long term. If this could be improved and made safe, maybe even signalized, I don't know if that would be necessary, then the major access could be, on 97, a sort of higher grade road for traffic than on Elm Street. There's also sort of a secondary benefit over here. The old railroad right-of-way is, there are plans to develop it as a bikeway.
Right.
That maybe a connection could be made for bikes too, relatively short here, so that there would be a possibility that, and that would relieve some car traffic too, if you get more kids that could safely ride their bike to school. They can't really do it now. So that's what Mike's referring to. But here again, it is a long-term possibility. If a plan could be developed, almost, obviously it works a little better if the school is here than up here. But in either case, this could be a long-term possibility that's pursued. But for the short term, we'd want a plan that works, now in order to proceed.
All right. Okay.
Okay?
I think, that's definitely something we should put on the radar to consider, but it shouldn't hold up this process right now. And even to the extent that we have current access and egress, if there becomes an issue with this potential other right-of-way, that also shouldn't hold up the process. What we should do is reach out to the abutters. I'm not familiar exactly with where it is, and just make sure that we exhaust all, discussions in that area. But again, it's not something that's gonna hold us up right now from deciding the location, woods versus fields. We have the grade configuration. We just need to know what site we're gonna choose.
I have a matrix question. Do we have time?
Sure.
Yeah, we have, I'm gonna say, we probably have about 3 more minutes before we're running late to our next, something we have to.
Sorry, I'm being
handle.
Rain Man, but I'm struggling to hear a program fit.
Okay,
A 5 for the K through 6 options.
yeah.
Whereas a 1 through 6 option is a 1 versus a 5 on program.
Right.
How is that such a disparity?
That's a sort of direct reflection
Oh,
of
it's-
your votes
educational.
It's
supporting K
educational
through 6.
program.
It's the educational program. And so the 1 through 6 is inherently not satisfying your desire to have K through 6.
The idea was
So
to
that's why it
limit
gets scored negatively.
the discussion that we
So that's
had.
a subjective.
No, it's
Well, that's pretty
educational
objective.
perspective
If,
from the
if
education
you've asked us
expert.
to design a building that has, 7 grades in it, and we only
Instead of-
design one that has
Right,
6,
okay.
we sort of failed, so that's why it gets a low score.
We spent a little bit of time, or a fair amount of time, I'm gonna say, talking about grade configuration, and Donna and Margaret were nice enough to give us their, opinion and their years of experience. The idea, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I could very well be, the idea between the difference between K to 6 and 1 to 6 was limiting the transitions, where
Right.
you could have a child
Right.
going to Pearlie for 1 year, for K, and then going over to another school for 1 to 6.
As well as the educational programming of the fact
Yeah,
that all of our.
if you voted
on
curriculum
that-
is-
In the same-
Well, the curriculum is continuum too, so
Right.
you
Right.
don't have a split.
Right, everybody was in the same chain.
If you as
All
a
of them.
community
And
sort of
staffing
reversed your
would have
thinking and
some
said you preferred
some
1 through
limit.
6, then those scores
Those would be
would
fives.
reverse.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So I just throw one more comment out and
Yep.
I'll be quiet. The,
No, it's-
I just think we, we're gonna look at the bottom line, because that's our tax impact, but I also think it's important, being optimistic and assuming this will go to the public for them to vote, that, in terms of value to Georgetown, we're getting a $45 million building for $24 million, or a $46 million building for $25 million. So, 20 million of our taxes that we put out there would come back into this town instead of going somewhere else. So I do want to, we're going to have to look at the dollars, but in terms of the value to Georgetown, we're getting a not quite 2 times, but a significant amount of value back that we're not paying for.
Enormous.
And that money is coming from the MSBA, and if it doesn't come to us, it's going to the next town on the list.
Right.
It's not something that we have to repay. It comes directly to us, and there will be someone else that gets it.
And Steve, not just the money return that you're talking about too, but culturally, what this school, the return on this school for the town as a whole, moving forward for the future, returns incalculable.
So I guess we have our meeting to vote and discuss next Thursday, the 17th at 7 o'clock. For those people that are viewing at home, please reach out to school committee members, members of the Board of Selectmen, members of the building committee. If you have issues, if you have questions, I've said before, this is moving quickly. We've been holding public meetings. Please call, email, or somehow reach out to us and let us know your thoughts and concerns, because what we don't want to have happen is have this move along and then all of a sudden have an outcry saying, I didn't know that this was moving along so quickly, because we're here now.
Is there, do they ever put out, like, probably in email, if you can excuse me, that
Yeah.
you might know where to write comments? But is there ever anything out in the press or anything as to, these are the people, these are the contacts that you need to know for your feelings if you don't have that opportunity?
I would say, look, I don't know, it would be calling myself or David Surface for the Board of Selectmen, Carol Jacobs.
Aren't they listed on,
They're
aren't
all
they
on the-
listed
on
on,
the
aren't
town
those
They're all
website.
on the
listed on the town
website.
website?
But
That's
he
what I
was,
said.
yeah, he's saying
Oh, you're saying
non-computer.
If you
non-email,
don't
Gary?
have access to that, not
Oh,
everybody has
oh.
access to that, so they might not know
Oh.
who to
So
contact.
I think they could call the selectmen's office.
Or the school
or
district.
Or the school
office.
district office.
Yeah.
Or, and then if you call the school district office, you would get Carol's office, and then they could direct you to Ellie and Michelle
And any school committee members,
any
if that's somebody.
of us. And we're all in the phone book, I believe.
352, something.
Yeah. I think those are probably the best ways. And certainly I know the library still has computers if people want to
And yet, you know, and again, it is disappointing that the press is not here for a meeting like this.
Surprising.
Yet again. But that's what we have to deal with. So we do the best we can to get the information out, but coverage is iffy at best.
And what it is.
And even when it is, it's wrong.
Cable definitely is a good alternative, so for a lot of people, so that's good that it shows over and over.
So that's the next procedure, and Ellie and Michelle will be getting back to both boards with the site, so that we'll be discussing them. Is there anything else we'll be adjourned? We're going to adjourn our meeting at this point.
To adjourn.
Second.
The Board of Selecting meeting is now over. I need a roll.
All those in
Okay.
favor? Aye.
All right.
Hey guys, good to see you.
All right, for the school committee, the chair will entertain a motion to go into executive session
Yeah, I
from which we will
I'll
not be
get it,
returning
through Monday night.
to regular session, and we'll be going into executive session under Mass General Law,
I'll
Chapter
talk to Mike
30A,
and I'll
Section
get it.
21, Paragraph 1, for the discussion of a personnel matter, and it's a roll call vote. Sorry.
Sure.
Thank you.
Oh, you have a race?
Yeah, state.
Thank you, Mike, for having that information on the deed.
Yeah, Franklin
I didn't have
Park.
time to grab that. Well,
Okay, I have to-
that's very helpful.